I've got Andrea Donsky on the Sexy Aging podcast today. Now, this is a real cool thing for me. I'm majorly fangirling. So I found Andrea. I know I'm actually going to get some eye rolling, I think, from listeners. I found Andrea on TikTok. Now, before you have this preconceived or judgmental thought going through your head around TikTok, isn't that a dance app? Yeah, kind of. I do a few dances on there too, but actually it's a massive resource for education. And when I popped in menopause as a keyword, Andrea's content came straight up, and I absolutely resonated with it because you make your content accessible to everyone. So Andrea is an entrepreneur, 20 years, nutritionist, healthy living expert, podcast host. Let's get it, girl. Author of Unjunk Your Junk Food. Very cool. TV, radio, health expert, mum, and a change maker. I mean, where do you go from there?
Well, thank you for such a nice intro.
It's so good to have you here. I just love you to share a little bit about what lights you up and how you got started into the whole sort of nutrition thing and where you're at today. And we're going to have a great conversation on life in general.
I love it. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Tracy. And I love hearing that my content came up on when you put in the hashtag menopause on TikTok, which is great. And it's so funny that you say that because originally I've only been on TikTok for about a year and a half now. And originally when my kids were on it, I have 3 children, 19, 17, and 11. And when my kids were on TikTok, they were like, dancing and doing all of these kind of like fun things. And I remember hearing for the longest time, I should go on TikTok. I should go on TikTok, like from marketing experts. And I kept thinking, well, I'm not a really good dancer. Like, I mean, I can do a lot of things really well. Dancing just isn't one of them. Although I love to dance. It's just, I'm not going to put it on video.
Yeah.
And then I kind of was watching it really carefully. And then in February of 2021, I said to my team, I'm like, you know what? Let's talk about menopause, just because I've been studying menopause. I'm a menopause educator, a menopause researcher over the last 5 years. And I thought, well, let me talk about menopause on TikTok. Let's see where it goes. And, I'm really grateful. It just completely blew up, and which is so amazing because I'm really educating. I'm sharing information. I'm talking about my experiences, and I'm validating and supporting people. And that's why I'm really super happy. And I love TikTok. Like, it really is a fun, creative outlet for me in terms of educating people about perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like you, I actually have just kind of started as well because I've been watching it for a long time. I got on it when in the pandemic, like so many people do. I jumped on my daughter's account, and I am an ex-dancer. So I thought, hey, this is so cute. This is so fun. And I go into it with a very open mind of I'm going to have fun. And so I had fun, and she showed me what she was doing, which was cool. And then like you, I started thinking about, this is actually a really cool forum to share what I'm learning and my perspective on this particular stage of life. And I just feel like the engagement is awesome in a way. Like, it's actually
Awesome.
really interesting. But I think the most interesting thing that I've learned out of it is you're never too old, and it's never too late, and you can always keep learning. So if you can sort of clear your mind of TikTok is not for me because I'm too old, I actually challenge that thought process now. So yes.
100%. It is real. And you know what? Everything evolves. I mean, I'm a very big fan of Gary Vee, and he talks a lot. Like, I just love Gary. And I know he talks primarily to, a certain demographic, but I love listening to it because I'm like, everything that he talks about, we can always apply to any demographic. And yeah, I'm in my 50s. I'm 52. I know, Tracy, we're the same age. And I just thought everything evolves, like Gary said. And so TikTok's going to evolve too. And it really did. So now, and it's a fun place to be. So from an engagement standpoint, I totally agree. The energy is amazing. Our community is amazing there. And I just feel like right now, this is the place to be, especially for what we're talking about.
Yeah. I think we're also being really authentic to our lives because we're going through an incredible transition that we didn't get a lot of content about or information. We couldn't tap into Facebook, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. There was nothing there. I'm in the fitness industry, you're a nutritionist, and we weren't really hearing about that conversation as we're going into it, which is really interesting, isn't it?
I knew nothing. I mean, it's like It's like, to me, it's just, now that I've been doing this for 5 years, and I remember when I was going through it, so I have a business partner. I've had one for the same female business partner for 22 years. We've had 3 companies where now we just launched our third one, which is Morphus, and which is all about menopause. And I remember when I was going through perimenopause, so I had my third child at 41. At
Yes.
42, you
42.
42.
Yeah.
Okay, so we both had children in our 40s, which, by the way, we can talk about something like, we can kind of talk about that
Let's
in a
talk
second.
about
But
that. Yeah.
oh, I love that, because I love meeting other women who had babies later in life. And I remember thinking to myself, this is how like my thinking was. It was like, oh, if I'm having a baby in my 40s, I'm not going to go into menopause till probably my late 50s. Like, and in my mind, I was like, oh, because my hormones are, working, or whatever I kind of justified it to myself with. And then I remember at 42, I started noticing changes. I wasn't sleeping well. I was getting headaches. I was exhausted by the end of the day. And then my period, like my periods were always a little bit wonky because I had PCOS. So I've
Yeah.
always had, issues with my cycle, but they were different. Like even when I would have my cycle, they were a little bit different. I was always in pain. I was so hungry all the time. Like there were all of these symptoms. And I remember because I do a lot of media. I do a lot of like, I've been doing podcasts. I have another podcast called Health Power for like many, many years. And I remember I speak to a lot of experts and I would say, hey, do you notice like your appetite is changing in your 40s? Like I didn't even know how to make the correlation. And then as I started diving into the research, I'm like, oh, right. Ghrelin is higher in perimenopause.
Yes.
That's why I'm hungry all the time.
Mm.
Or like, inflammation increases as we get into perimenopause and menopause, or whatever it was. And that's what started me down my journey of like, well, wait a minute. If I had no idea, and this is my job, this is what I do day in, day out, educating people, then maybe other people don't know either. And I was right. And that's why, like, I so agree with you, like having a platform where we can share what we're learning and help others through it, so they don't have to be kind of in like the dark as I was, or you were, like you're saying. To me, it's like, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah. I often talk about from personal experience, hey, I've just found this out. Like I might say something like that in a post or on a podcast interview, or I've got a question and I want to talk to someone about that. So I want to find out, and I take everyone on that journey with me. As in, yeah, I probably do have more knowledge than the average woman, and definitely in the fitness space and how to apply movement and being in menopause and what you should and shouldn't be doing,
which is so important,
which is super important. But also, just like, I don't know everything, so let me help you find out as well. And I really like that, I'm asking from a place with lots of curiosity, the questions that probably other people have on their mind. And I think it feels so amazing to be growing in this way at this stage of life, to be so curious all the time, and to be always looking for the answers, and to not be afraid or second guess myself that someone is going to say, oh no, I don't want to talk to you because Andrea, you're talking to me.
Well, there you go. You're so cute, Tracy. I mean, the truth is, my philosophy is that nobody has all the answers. And if anybody says, oh, I have all the answers, then I'm like, it's a bit of a red flag for me, because truthfully, we all have, we may have a very general knowledge base of things, but we're always learning. Once we start, like, to me, I'm always learning. Once I stop learning, I'm like, I'm going to have to do something new, right? Like, because do we ever really stop learning? I really don't believe we do, right? So I think what you're doing is amazing, and learning and then sharing what you learn, which is exactly what I do and what makes us tick and makes us really good at what we do, because then people know where to go. You're a great resource for people when it comes to, like you said, movement and exercise. I want to learn from you. That's an area outside of my expertise.
Yeah. Hey, we have really gone hardcore into this conversation, and if you don't mind, I just have a few questions around your background and like how did you get into the nutrition thing? Is that something you've always been into since a young age, or have you got a backstory? Because quite often people that go into something that becomes a career, there's a really compelling reason for that. So open up the doors, tell me everything.
Sure. Actually, no, I started in my 20s. No, I was not always into healthy living. In fact, I grew up eating fast food. So my mom was very much into healthy living. She always, when we had dinner, she would always serve a salad. We would always have healthy meals. But then when I got into my teenage years, I kind of veered away from it, right? And I was eating a lot of fast food, and I was eating foods that were fried and just not healthy, and a lot of junk food. And so my story is probably very similar to many other people out there, in the sense that it came from a place of need. So when I was in my 20s, what started to happen to me is that every time I would eat anything at that point, I would get gas and bloating, and I just wouldn't feel good. And this lasted for years and years. I went to doctor after doctor to find out, why am I not feeling good? Why is my stomach always gassy? Why am I getting cramps? Why do I have pains? And every time I would eat something, I would get a stomach ache, whether it could have been dairy, it could have been gluten. Like, I just had no idea that food affected our body in the way that it does. And then
Yeah.
I remember this clear as day. I was engaged to who's now my husband, to Rich. And I was lying in bed one day, and I remember looking at him, and he's kind of pivotal in several of my stories. I was lying in bed one day and I looked at him, and I had like this big belly. And I remember it was the end of the day, and I looked at him and I said, I really have to figure out what's going on with me, because it's just so uncomfortable. And I just need to understand, why am I feeling so bad all the time? Why are my glands hurting me? Why do I have no energy? So I decided I picked up a magazine that I loved reading. I was interested in healthy living. So I started reading a magazine, and I saw an ad for a school to become a nutritionist. And I thought, that's what I'm going
That's
to
the
do.
answer. Yeah.
There you go. So I went back to school to get my nutrition degree, and I never looked back. I mean, I just remember sitting in school going, I was like, I was like wide-eyed, and I was so excited to be there. And I thought, okay, I found my calling, and I
Yeah.
understand now. And that's just kind of taking me on my journey and I also love research. Like, I in university, I loved marketing research. So I just kind of blended everything that I was super interested in and made it a career.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. So you've just wholeheartedly followed your passion.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it kind of takes you on different journeys, and you meet different people and pick up different ideas. And obviously you got into podcasting, you wrote a book, you have lots of resources, and you're a speaker. I mean, you're obviously a very accomplished speaker. You do a lot of public speaking on television and what have you. So I mean, I can really hear that passion in you, and it's yeah, I can feel it through the screen. It's so cool.
Yes, I
Let's
am very
talk
passionate about
about
it.
something we just touched on about having children later in life.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's really similar. I think back now to lots of little messages that I received along the way on my pregnancy journey. So I have an 18-year-old, and then I have a 9-year-old, and I've blogged about the gap in between, which is, for a lot of women, there's the three M's. There's uh, menstruation, miscarriage, and menopause, right? Kind of three taboo topics. So I talk about the journey with miscarriage, and try to share with other women like all the different things that happened to me, all the different scenarios, not linked to, which is really interesting. But one of the things that did come up for me only later in life, when my son was probably about 5 or 6, and I started going into obvious perimenopause, was, oh shit, did I leave having a baby too late for my hormones to really do this properly? And oh, is that the reason why my obstetrician said, you probably need to have another baby, when I was like 37? And then all those little moments that I sort of reflect back on, how a woman's body is probably meant to have children a lot sooner. And
Mhm.
yet,
Yeah.
media, celebrities, fertility clinics, all the things are telling us it's never too late and you can do this, you know? Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's very interesting. I have two older children. I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, a son and a daughter, and I had them very close together. They were 20 months apart. And at the time, I remember thinking, I'm never going to have another child, because it was really tough when I had them. I was 32 and 35, or 33 and 35. And I remember thinking to myself that, wow, this is like, it's so hard just to have these two. I can't imagine. And then when I was turning 40, I said to my husband, I come from a family of 3 children. I said, I just want to try for another child. Let's see if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If the universe, if it's meant to be from the universe, it'll be. And I actually miscarried on my 40th birthday.
Yeah.
And and I want to hear your story as well, but I miscarried. I turned 40. I remember I was going on a trip, and I had miscarried, and went through those emotions, and went through that. And then I said to my husband, well, let's just try one more time. Let me see. And then it ended up, I had Abby. And in terms of having a child when you're older, I mean, I've had it when I was in my earlier 30s and my mid 30s, and then now in my 40s. And I definitely see a difference in terms of how I feel, like energy wise, right? Patience wise. So I
Mm.
think that I truly believe that whenever you're ready to have your baby is when you should have your baby. My sister had 2 babies in her 40s. Like actually it was 39 and like 42, or like super clear 40 and 42. So she had babies later because she wasn't ready. She was working. She didn't get married till she was older. So I truly, there's no judgment ever anywhere in anything that I always talk about, that I ever talk about. But it does get harder the older you are. There's no question. And I could see, because and you too, you did it both ways. So you could see the difference.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it was super easy to get pregnant with my first child. She's 18. So it was that at 34. And I'm like, oh, I think that I'm supposed to have a baby by 35. You know, all these preconceived notions that you have around the things that you should be achieving as you get older. And that was easy, like first time trying. So that was my go-to. That was my thought process of, oh, so when I want to have another one, I shouldn't have any problem. Yeah, so I had multiple miscarriages in between. Like you, I was pregnant at 40. I think it was 10 weeks. And that miscarriage was 5 months. So that was really rough because obviously I'm starting to form an attachment to this baby, and I knew it was a boy and all of that sort of stuff. So it was really, really tough. And the recovery was intense as well, because my body took a long time for the pregnancy hormones to exit, and then trying to come back to a normal period. Very difficult. So to get pregnant, to think that I would want to have another baby was almost off the radar, and it actually just happened almost like an accident. I'll say it's like a meant to be, because and I was sort of half in and half out of the conversation. Like, I would absolutely love to have another child, and if it doesn't happen, I have a child. You know, how blessed am I? I already have a human being that I've been blessed with to influence and shape, and you know, and be a mum to. And so I knew, you know, with other women that's challenging, you know, when you're struggling to have one child, and here I have one. So yeah, it was just interesting. I had Soul, his name's Soul, at 42. And what happened after that, now I reflect, is my periods never returned to normalcy. They were much they were spaced, you know, not as long. So 23 days, every 23 days, much longer, much heavier, much more intense pain. And also I had the same as you, the fatigue, the recovery from workouts wasn't really happening. And I actually put that down to being an older mum looking after a toddler. You know, not really making the connection to the fact that my hormones had shifted, and I was probably premenopausal at that stage. So yeah, really challenging, hey?
Yeah, it can be. Yes. And I laugh when I hear doctors refer to it as geriatric pregnancies, right? I laugh. I'm like,
We
gosh.
connected on that too. It's like, oh, geriatric pregnancy. That's you. Yeah.
I heard, actually, one of the things that I've heard recently, and I want to look into it more from a research standpoint, is that a lot of women have shared with me that when they've had children in their 40s, they went into perimenopause pretty soon after. And so I thought that was really interesting, because there isn't really research on that. And that's something that I'm going to dig into a little bit more with our community, because it was something that surprised me too. Like I said, I was completely thrown for a loop. But now what's great, and with these platforms, and your platform and my platform on TikTok, is that we're able to share the information so that women have more information, or individuals have more information, so they can say, oh, wait, maybe that's me too. Because I was in perimenopause for 5 years before I even knew I was in perimenopause. And I was thinking back on the weekend, I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and I went through a very traumatic event in 2017 and 2018. And I remember, because she's going through perimenopause right now, and she supported me when it was happening. And I said to her, when I think about it, those were my prime perimenopausal years, and you know how you feel now. And then I went through this traumatic event, and she was like, oh my gosh, like it all makes sense how I handled it at the time. Big T, small T, whatever it is, it was extremely traumatic for a year. But I thought, wow, going through perimenopause and going through it at the same time, it kind of explained a lot of how I felt, or what I was going through, or the reactions that I had, right, to
Yeah,
it versus
absolutely.
if I wasn't in that stage of life. So I just want women to understand that, there are resources now and you're not alone, and we validate and support you. And if you have questions, you can find the answers, at least a lot more of the answers now than you, at least that I was able to find, more so than what I was able to find back then.
Yeah. Look, you've really touched a nerve with me actually when you say how perimenopause dysregulates your ability to manage something that probably would have happened and you could have, worked your way through it quite easily, and yet it became so much bigger and so much harder to get over.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
look,
much.
I had something very similar. We haven't even discussed what that is, but I guess my response to it, and the shit that was going up in my head around this
Mhm.
particular situation, when I reflect back on it, it wasn't even that big a deal. But to me, it was so big and so distressing, and I had created something in my head that wasn't true. And I can honestly say that. And I wrote about that in my book, like how the hormones can actually cause that level of anxiety, rage,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, all of that stuff, right? So, and how it impacts
Yeah.
on your life makes me really empathetic for people that are struggling
Yeah.
in relationships,
Yeah,
struggling
exactly.
at work, to be understood, or to be able to not have the tools to have someone tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, look, do you need some time? Do you need a moment? Like, I know you're in menopause right now, so your response was probably not what I expected. So do you want to just take a moment? Like, that sort of stuff that's starting to come through in the workplaces now as well, I think is hallelujah, right? We,
Yeah.
we absolutely, because we've got incredible, skilled, experienced women. Like, this is taking a complete segue, but it does remind me of, how we react during menopause isn't normally how we would have reacted. And then when you reflect back, or you go, oh gosh, I really messed that up, and I wouldn't have done that
Yeah.
normally. So, yeah, life
Yeah.
lessons, right?
Oh yeah, and dealing with stress, it's, it definitely is a harder thing. It's a fact, as we
Yeah,
get into this stage of life, and it can be harder for a lot of us, or our anxiety is a lot worse or triggered or exacerbated or coming on. There's onset anxiety at this phase of life, right? Our
yeah,
gut is changing, with that gut brain connection, right? That our serotonin, like our serotonin is made in our gut. Like there's just so much going on. Our thyroid is changing. So, you know, knowing all of this now can make a really big difference so that we can have the language. It's the
yeah.
words.
The
It's the,
words.
like you just said, it's like, okay, look, I am going, if had I known what I was going through at the time, I could have communicated it properly, but I was literally clueless that what I was going through was actually, I was also in perimenopause at the time. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Um, we want to talk about aging. And I actually love this topic, and it's the original reason why I started the podcast. And for some reason, I ended up going down the rabbit hole of menopause because I felt like I want to talk about aging, healthy aging, and longevity. That was the original start of sexy aging. And then I went, oh, hang on, I've come up against menopause, and this is actually going to impact me significantly how I feel about aging in the future. And in actual fact, it does, especially in the health, your overall health, right? So I thought, well, I better attack that topic too. And then it just went, blew up. Seems like a lot of people want to talk about menopause. Um, but aging is something I'm deeply passionate about. And I just would love to hear your perspective on aging, and yeah, how you feel in your 40s versus your 50s, and what do you see for the future. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm just going to sit back and let you roll.
you know, it's a very interesting topic because I always say, so I come from a place of menopause, right? Being in perimenopause or menopause. I always say everybody, if they're blessed to live long enough, will go through menopause. So it's something that we're all going to go through it. And I remember when I was 47, so let me take you back to when I was 47 and I had my first hot flash and I thought, oh my gosh, everything I've been feeling is probably due to menopause, but I don't really understand menopause. But wait, isn't my grandmother in menopause and my mother? I know she's had a hysterectomy. She's in menopause. Isn't menopause for old people? Like it
Yeah,
was like my brain, I just, from a processing standpoint, I didn't realize that you could start peri as early as 35, right? I didn't know. I had zero information on it. And I remember thinking at 47, I was 3 years out of turning 50. And I got anxious. I'm like, oh my gosh, are people, I had two businesses at the time. I'm like, is anyone going to want to work with me? Am I going to be irrelevant at 50 years old? Are people going to, like, I know you're like, me too,
Yeah.
me
Well, the fitness industry, right?
too. Right,
It's
right,
like,
right.
it's how you look and how you present yourself. And where does a 47 or 50-year-old woman fit into that? Very
Yeah.
anxious. Yeah. Keep going. This is like
Yeah.
my
So
story.
I was like really anxious. And then for 3 years leading up to 50, I was really like, I had to really process turning 50, and I was embarrassed, and I never wanted to tell anyone how old I was. And then I remember just before so my birthday's in January. And I remember over Christmas break, I was cleaning my office and I was listening to podcasts, and I was listening to Oprah, because I love Oprah.
I love Oprah.
I love Oprah.
Soul,
And
yeah,
from the for her own podcast,
yeah,
and Super Soul Sunday. And so I guess they had it was an episode from Super Soul Sunday. And anyway, so she had three supermodels in their 60s on, and they were talking about aging. They were having a very honest conversation about aging. And they were saying that they were having a hard time with it, and everyone kind of shared their experience. And then Oprah was saying, you know, which the way she looks at age is she looks at it from a place of wisdom. So the older that we are, the more wisdom we've accumulated, the more experience we have. And I remember thinking, now I know why Oprah always says her aha moment. I was like,
mm,
now I get it. Because when I was in my third, I started my first company at 29 years old. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no experience. Fast forward 22 years later, I'm pretty experienced as an entrepreneur. I'm learning a lot more. I'm starting a new company now, something I've never done before. We're going to be selling supplements to the US market to start. I'm constantly learning. So I always say, like, I'm starting a new business at 52 years old. So
yay.
she's completely right. I couldn't have, like, and if I did this way back when, it wouldn't be the same, coming in with the same knowledge base that I have now. So I thought, you know what, Oprah, you are absolutely right. And that something just clicked in me. And when I turned 50, I was so proud of turning 50. I tell everybody my age. I am not embarrassed about it at all anymore. And yes, I'm still relevant. And yes, I'm constantly reinventing myself. And, to me, it is a privilege to get older. And my husband's mother, she died, unfortunately, in her early 40s. She was
Yeah,
mid 40s. She was 45 years old. She never lived long enough to even go into menopause, right? To even get to this stage. So I just kind of look at it from a different point of view. Now, having said that, are there days when I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm getting, like I'm looking old, or I feel like, sure. I mean, I'm not going to say, it's all like, roses, and there isn't a time when I'm like, oh, all those creases in my neck, it's definitely showing. Absolutely. I have my days. But I'd say for the most part, I really love getting older. I love the wisdom that comes with it. I love how I feel. I love how I'm more empowered. I love how I'm constantly learning. Like, I'm constantly doing the spiritual work on myself. I'm constantly processing things. And like I said before, as long as I'm learning, then I'm happy, and then I'm
yeah,
always trying to improve myself and trying to do better and be kinder, and just kind of always trying to just participate in life, I guess, is kind of how I look at it.
yeah. Oh, I adore that. And it's so much of it has resonated with me. I think one of the upsides of aging as well is that you just stop judging yourself and others. Like, I just become so much more relaxed when people are sharing some of their challenges and stuff, and that you can probably help them through it, but you want them to just offload and ask more questions and judge less, and try not to fix things so much. And yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about aging is I just become a lot less, I just don't think about things like that so much anymore. I'm just way more relaxed
That's
around.
good.
Yeah, and myself. Like, I think one of the things about putting yourself out there on social platforms, people say, well, I could never do that, or I would never want to show my face, or, well, I think when you have a message and you can get over yourself, right, then, and you can create some level of impact, I think I go into it like, if I can help one person, then this is worth it. And
Yeah.
that's helped me to stop the whole judgment thing around my age and how I look on camera, or, how I sound on podcasts. Like, I just don't care. It's so nice to be sitting in this very comfortable place. And look, that doesn't stop me from being open to criticism or open to feedback. Like, that's another cool thing I've learned
Yeah.
as I'm aging, is that all feedback is going to be relevant at some level. Some of it's kind, some of it's not. That's okay. I can deal, I'm bigger than that, but I can go, oh yeah, actually that's a really good point. I can make a difference if I change this, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am also loving aging, Andrea, and I planned my 50th from about the age of 47.
That's
um,
great. I love that.
yeah, I wanted to really celebrate. I also, like you, wanted to celebrate it as a milestone of it being a blessing to be alive,
Yeah.
and to represent for other women that if you do take care of your health and you double down on your movement, your nutrition, your sleep, your stress, if you double down on the knowledge and apply it, then yeah, life gets really good, like really good, because you drag all these amazing experiences with you and the deep well of friendships. Like it doesn't become a much bigger pool of friends. That pool closes in, but those people that are still with you, going through it with you and going through menopause with you and still there,
Mhm.
that's a real blessing as well.
Yeah, it is. And I have a lot less tolerance for BS, to be honest, and for
Yeah.
toxicity and for like, I just have a lot less tolerance for that for sure. And kindness is really, for me, like you said, like people can give you their feedback and some of it you'll take in, some of it you won't, but the delivery is important. I mean, part of my job is not to be judgmental. I don't judge people for where they're at. Like that's just, it's been, whether it was through Naturally Savvy, whether it was through Morphus, I don't judge people for where they're at. And I like that you said, for many of us, as we get older, we become less judgmental. And I think that's an important thing because the one thing that I'm really trying to work on myself, and I've gotten a lot better, is I was very judgmental of myself, not so much of others, but very much of myself. So I'll give you an example on, let's say, Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So for many, many years, I would want to post something in Instagram. I'd be like, oh no, I don't like the way I look, or oh no, it's not perfect, right? Or even
Perfect.
doing my
Yeah.
TV segments. I'm like, I was nicknamed by one of the producers. I love her. She was like, you're the consummate perfectional, because I'm a perfectionist and a professional. And I was like, and I was at the time, I was like, yeah, she's right. I'm a total perfectionist, but I am very professional. But then as I started, coming into this phase of life and doing TikTok, I'm realizing less and less I'm trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be me, right? So, now I'll post on TikTok. I mean, if you see my videos, my videos, Tracy, like I am far from looking perfect in my videos. And in fact, I
It's
go
great.
out of my way to make myself look very imperfect, right? So I've really learned a lot and have really come to terms with myself in terms of less judgment for myself. And I'm proud of myself. I'm not 100% there yet. And it's always a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Progress, not perfection,
Yeah.
if it's well for what we're talking about. But I'm much less judgmental of myself than I ever have been in my life. So it's kind of moving in that direction of, okay, let's just, because realistically, the only opinion that matters is ours, right? Like, so
Hmm.
we have to start with, and obviously the people immediately around you that, that you want to make sure that, you're kind of all in sync. But I definitely am getting much better at being less judgmental of myself. And I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's such an empowering conversation. And I think that's the word that I use as well as I move through my 50s and hopefully beyond, is the empowerment. Like
Mm,
not the
yes.
shutting down of life, but that anything is possible, So it's very cool. So you mentioned that you've started a third company. I think that's really exciting. It also integrates this conversation of you can do anything at any age. So talk to me a little bit more about Morphus. I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So when I turned 47, I said to my business partner Randy, because we've always started companies that were kind of in sync to where we were in life. So when we started our Healthy Shopper coupon book, it was our first business that we had for 18 years. It was based in Canada only, and it was coupons for natural organic products because we were buying a new house and products, natural organic was a lot more expensive than conventional. So we started a coupon book. Then when we were having babies and getting married, we started Naturally Savvy, which we still have today. It's
Yeah.
naturallysavvy.com. So it's a lifestyle blog, let's say website, that really kind of talks about fertility, having babies, kind of like up to like 45, let's say that 25 to 45 age spot, like prime spot. And then when I started getting hot flashes and realizing I'm in perimenopause, we're moving into the next phase of our life. My partner Randy was also in perimenopause. I'm like, why don't we kind of maneuver and kind of talk about perimenopause and menopause, and let's start a new company, which we did. It's called Morphus. We are morphus.com. And the reason we called it Morphus is because metamorphosis, our bodies are changing, us as a community. So we are
Mm,
changing together as a community. So it's Morph,
yep.
MORPH, us, Morphus.
Love that.
It's wearemorphus.com is the website. And then the reason, so we're an educational site. So we're blending education as well as products. So we're going to be launching our own supplements very soon in 2020, in the early 2023. And it's going to be in the US market to start, as I mentioned earlier. And the reason why I really wanted to go in the direction of supplements was because I managed my menopausal symptoms through diet, so nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements. And they played such a big role for me in this phase of my life. And I thought, I spent the last 3 years really digging into the research on ingredients. So same way I was passionate about ingredients for food when I wrote Unjunk Your Junk Food. I wrote 3 books on the topic of eating, of
Yeah.
reading labels and understanding it. And I thought, well, what I'm going to do now is I want to take that passion and bring it to menopause in terms of understanding ingredients and supplements, because there are a lot of things that we can do that can help us feel better. Is it the answer to everything? Absolutely not. However, there are a lot of things that we can do with nutrition, lifestyle tips like managing our stress, and supplements that can help us feel a lot better. So that's why
Yeah.
we decided to start Morphus.
Oh, that's amazing. So I love everything you're doing, and I'm going to keep following you, Andrea. And I obviously am going to put everything in the show notes, and hopefully our
Thank you.
listeners will also tap into what you're doing. I think that the more opportunity to engage with women like us, get our different perspectives, and see how they feel connected to our messages, I think it's great. We're just going to keep putting stuff out there and don't stop. I'll see you at 60.
Exactly. We'll come back on. We'll have our conversation over the last, decade of what we did in our 50s. I love it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for having me on, Tracy. It's been
yeah.
fun.
You're welcome. Thanks, Andrea.